I believe that the key existential problem mankind has is with authority. In the past, when there are tyrants like Nimrod, all the way up to the Middle Ages, the divine right of kings, it wasn't such a problem because it was whatever tyrant ruled your area that you were responsible to. So his authority was what you feared. In the brief hiatus that we've had with democracy, people don't know who to fear anymore. And we're left to figure out what authority to obey. Some people are fortunate and they're born with an inner conscience, an inner compass. The Hebrew word for compass is matzpen, which is like matzpun. It's the same root. In any case, because we have no problem with the tyrants, and we've kind of run amok when we had no fear of tyrants or any other authority, we're back to that rule of Nimrod, as we can all see, those of us who can see. But this isn't what the creator of the universe, the God of Jacob, intended. He actually wanted Israel to prove to the world that by obeying his covenant, we obtain freedom and liberty. And to take it a step further, when the world sees how Israel is blessed beyond the wildest dreams of any tyrant, they'll probably want to join us and find out just what this covenant entails. So I believe that when the Mashiach comes, what is written in Ezekiel 20 will manifest. God will again pass us under the rod of his covenant and bring us into the discipline of his covenant. So my course in the Torah is going to be directed toward preparing us not for a fuzzy Santa Claus type Mashiach, but for the real one that we're going to experience hopefully pretty soon. My name is Ron Singer, and my YouTube channel is Israel Reclaiming the Birthright. And without further ado, let's start understanding what Genesis is telling us. We have great commentators. I like Samson Raphael Hirsch the best, frankly. So let's get into it. The mysteries of creation are still mysteries. A professor named Hubble, Edwin Hubble, in the 1930s, gave us the idea of the Big Bang. And from there, the creationists became more emboldened to teach creation rather than evolution. Evolution was something that was orchestrated by the monarchs after the American Revolution was successful, but we'll get into this another time. Anyway, it's basically a ridiculous idea that you could have the Pythagorean theory, squares, gravity, the law of lift, flight, all these amazing things, the human organism, the genome, the microbiome, the incredible complexity of life just evolve from some inanimate object. But anyway, I'll leave you with that. So what issue we had in the garden is the same issue we have today. One of a problem with authority. Adam was given a first command, and that command was really simple. You can eat of all the trees of the Garden of Eden, but of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you're forbidden to eat, and on the day that you eat of it, you will begin to die. Now there is a strange creature in the garden called a serpent, and he's more clever than the other beasts of the field, and he talks. Another mystery. My simple way of looking at it is by its function. It's something that leads on the negative impulse in mankind to do things that are contrary with the true authority in the creation. So when confronted by the serpent, Eve fell prey to his chicanery. But it wasn't Eve's fault so much as Adam's, because what Eve said belies that Adam had the original problem with authority by not relaying the actual command of God. She said, of all the trees of the garden we can eat, but of the fruit of the tree in the middle of the garden we are not allowed to eat, and we are not allowed to touch it. So here we have the genesis of the existential key problem with mankind. The inability to follow authority. Now we had free will then, and it was easy enough to do it, but something within us, within Adam and all of us, his descendants and Eve's, is this problem with authority. Now Israel was supposed to be the antidote to all this. We were given a covenant. There were laws in the covenant, and if we obeyed them, we remained free. We had one authority, and the authority was a true authority, a just authority, and a beneficent authority. But somehow, till this day, we still have this Tikkun of Adam to make. And we're reminded of it by the prophet Hosea in the 6th chapter, 7th verse of the book of Hosea. So let's move along. We identified the key problem of mankind with authority. Let's move over to Noah. Noah is given a command when he begins to disembark to let all the animals go free. Now what Noah does is he builds himself an altar and he starts making sacrifices. Now this is not what God wanted, because in the garden, in chapter 1 of Genesis, verse 29, we're told that we're to have basically what amounts to a plant-based diet. Now prior to that, we're given dominion over the animals, and most people are taught to believe that dominion means, well, we can do what we want with them, we can eat them. But so we don't get that idea in our minds because of this negative impulse. We're told that of all the seed-bearing herbs and fruits, that these will be our food and for all the animals. And of course, at that time, there was harmony in the world. Now, since Adam didn't obey God by adding an extra law to God's command, turns out that his son Abel did a similar thing, and he brought an animal sacrifice. And we can see what that resulted in. It was the beginning of death in the world. Anyway, getting back to Adam, we find the same problem in Noah. Noah began to make the sacrifices, and God appreciated that gesture, as Samson Raphael Hirsch explains. And he said in his heart, not, wow, we can eat meat now. No, he was disappointed. If you take a look at the real context of the passage where God spoke to his heart, he says, I will no longer curse the earth for man's sake. I'll say the Hebrew first. Ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra minurav. Because the imaginings of the heart of man are evil from his youth. So God has lowered his expectations of us exercising free will responsibly, and he's not going to destroy us. He's going to help move us along. And as a conciliation to Noah, who, if you read in Ezekiel 14, is one of the 3 righteous men in all of creation, he gives us the permission to eat meat. It's not his desire, but he allows it. However, there are consequences, God tells us. And these are that he'll require the blood of the animals from man at the hand of the animals, and the blood of man from his brother. So for people who have been praying for peace, just take a look at the genesis of war and disharmony in the world. It is actually the meat eating. Now I know this goes against the grain, I don't mean to be punny, of our religious establishments in the world who believe they can eat what they want, so long as in the case of the Jews that it's kosher. But this is not the case, and I'm going to prove it to you. And the reason this is critical is because we will never have peace in the world. We will never stop experiencing anti-Semitism unless we can make this Tikkun of Adam. Now, if you take a look at Numbers 11, when our people were lusting after meat, God turns and answers Moshe's plea and says, okay, they'll eat meat not for 1 or 2 days or 5 or 10 or 20, but for an entire month until it comes out of their nostrils and is loathsome to them, because they have rejected the Lord who is amongst them. Now we're back to this issue of authority. The people of Israel, even in the desert, had a problem with authority. And even when we were given the Torah, with all its laws, which we said we would follow, remember the Naaseh and Nishma, we will hear and obey, we will obey and hear. Well, we never did it, and we haven't been doing it since. Now I'm going to prove this to you. If you take a look at the book of Deuteronomy, God starts to explain very clearly that we are not allowed to add and subtract from his written Torah. So we're back again to this problem with authority and having to make the Tikkun of Adam. If you take a look at Deuteronomy 4:2, we're forbidden to add and subtract from God's written word. If you go to Deuteronomy 13:1, the same thing. If you go to Deuteronomy 28:14, the same thing. If you go to Deuteronomy 28:58, it's even more elaborate. Because in that chapter, we have the blessings and the curses with their full litany. We can read it in Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 7, but in chapter 28 of Deuteronomy, we have the full litany of blessings and curses. I remember explaining this to one rabbi nearby, and he literally freaked out. He threw his hands up and down and said, "Who needs a God like that?" And I told him, this is who our God is. He's willing to give us everything. Perfect health, perfect peace, perfect happiness, everything that is miraculous, that no tyrant with all his power could even dream of attaining through his authority. But we have to earn it by setting an example, by giving credit to God, by obeying Him. And these are simple laws. I mean, the laws that we associate with God are additions, subtractions, substitutions, and more additions and additions until a lot of people say, "No, I can't do this, I'm out of here." And indeed, over the past 2,000 years of our authorities, our leaders, most Jews are not Orthodox, and many of them don't even believe in God. They just got so confused that they just do whatever they feel. And it runs into trouble. Because every so often, some authority decides they're going to destroy a bunch of Jews. So I'm going to continue and show you where the passages are that say we're not allowed to add and subtract from God's written Torah. And I would like you to, I'm going to see if I can let you see this, frankly. It may work out that this is one page. I know it's a little difficult. You may want to be able to take a screenshot of it. Let's try the next page. I'll read them to you afterwards, because they're really critical, because we're not going to be able to enjoy life unless we overcome this problem with authority we have. Anyway, so I'll get into it now. So we have Deuteronomy 4:2, 13:1, 5:29, 28:14, 28:58, Joshua 1:7, Joshua 23:6, Jeremiah 11:3, 1 Kings 2:3, 2 Kings 23:3, Proverbs 35, Isaiah 42:24, 2 Chronicles 34:21, 2 Chronicles, oh, I got that one, 34:21, Joshua 8:3, there's also Joshua 23:6, and that's it for a while. Now, this is how we make the Tikkun of Adam. Without this, we're not going to have this Tikkun of Adam. And we're not going to have the kind of Jewish life that's promised as our blessings. Now, I know our leaders have told us that, we know it's even in the army in Israel, Ein lismoch al hanes, we're not allowed to rely on miracles. But this is precisely the birthright of the nation of Israel, to be able to rely on God's miracles, because He's handing them to us, and all we have to do is figure out which authority to obey. Now, we're warned that we have bad leaders. Okay, I'm going to show you some of the passages that tell us about our bad leaders. You can screenshot this if you like. And the bottom of the page, if you're curious, where it says Jewish warrior, we're not yeshivaniks. We're not supposed to sit all day and study. We're supposed to use the instruction manual of our covenant and build the olam haba, or what's said in the Parsha of Noach, the Oel of Shem. This is the ethical, moral, and spiritual society where capitalism, for example, has an underpinning of brotherhood, loving your brother as yourself. Now, the bad leaders are referred to in Isaiah 9:15, Jeremiah 10:21, 23:1, 56, Ezekiel 13:10, 34:13, Zechariah 10:3 and 11:17. And I mean, it's really strange to me. We grow up in a corporate world where every CEO, every Boy Scout leader, every military commander goes through some kind of an evaluation. He goes through a performance assessment. It's normal. Every good man goes through it when he gets home from work or while he's going home from work, because he wants to do better. So we do performance evaluations so that we know how we can improve. If you take a look at the outcome of your leadership and you see, by golly, we've lost 36 soldiers at the Battle of Ai, like Joshua did, he throws himself down and he's downcast, and God says, get up and find out what happened. So now we have a kind of a performance evaluation, and if you go to Joshua chapter 7, you'll see what that is. There was idol worship. Someone took the forbidden idols for their gold and silver and jewels. And this is explicitly forbidden to even covet that in the book of Deuteronomy and elsewhere in the Torah. I forgot offhand. But if you take a look at the Talmud, Avodah Zarah 52a says something else. If our intention isn't to do idol worship, and if it was made by a hammer and chisel, another hammer and chisel can break it down and make it kodesh, for us to use again. I mean, this is kind of like this issue of the months of the year. We're not allowed to make mention of foreign gods, but we have 2 months named after Babylonian deities. Go ask rabbis if they even know this. I found one that did, and I have a lot of respect for him. He said, well, of course, we're doing that because we want to show that they have no power over us. And I asked him, by whose authority have we done this? And you know what his answer was? A big silence. Again, the Tikkun of Adam and Eve. Now, as long as we're on this topic for a moment, I want to get to Leviticus 23. Here we have the litany of our holidays. And it's very relevant now because we're counting the Omer from the wrong day. And I'm going to ask you to look at Leviticus 23 so that you can count correctly and so that we can finally celebrate the holiday of Shavuot when it really is supposed to be celebrated according to our divine authority, not our temporal authorities. We're told that we are not allowed to eat bread until we bring the offering. Now, if we bring the offering on the day after the first day of Passover, we're still forbidden to eat bread. Now, this was an ancient controversy. The Sadducees believed that we were counting from the intermediary Shabbat within the holiday of Passover. The Pharisees said that we count from the day after the first day of Passover. And the people who didn't have the benefit of our leaders who never did a performance evaluation because it's more of a mutual admiration society, our Ethiopian Jewish brothers and sisters, they got it right. They said, oh, the Sabbath that God's talking about, only after that you can eat bread, so we'll count from the day after the seventh day of Passover, and then we'll get to the right day to celebrate Hag HaShavuot. Give you something to think about. Anyway, so let's move back into Genesis. We have a diet that tells us basically that we're plant-based. And I want to show that to you because it's critical. You have to have overwhelming evidence now to get back to the authority who issued the command for a plant-based diet. So I'll read it to you, but I want you to see if you can screenshot it as well. Let me turn the page here. I'll read it to you now. The diet for Israel. Genesis 1:29, 8:15, 9:1, Numbers 11:18, Isaiah 1:11, Isaiah 7:14, Isaiah 7:22, Isaiah 11:6, and the big one, Isaiah 66:3, Jeremiah 7:21, Jeremiah 6:20, Hosea 6:6, Hosea 2:20, and then there's an issue of, well, why did God give us all these sacrifices? And again, what we see is he lowered his expectations. He didn't want to destroy us out of his hand and start with Moshe. Moshe talked him out of it. So he gave us bad laws. And amongst these bad laws are the animal sacrifices. And he tells us in Ezekiel 20:25 that he has given us bad laws by which we cannot live. And when we inquire of God, he says in Ezekiel 14, he tells Ezekiel the prophet, I will not be inquired of by these people. And they set up their idols in their mind. So you don't need to have a full-blown statue to be doing idol worship. The veritable idol worship today is by whose authority we guide our lives. And I believe that the reason we're heading toward bad times again, where Israel and Jews are on the world's bullseye, is because we couldn't get it right with the Tikkun of Adam and start obeying God. Now, it was a problem even when God chose Abraham. Abraham was promised from the very beginning that he would be the father of many nations. He was told to be a blessing to others. Yet when it came down to there being a famine in the land of Canaan, and he went to Egypt, instead of being afraid of God and being confident that God would take care of him and do what he said and preserve him and make him the father of many nations, Abram was fearful. And he told Sarah, look, please say that you're my sister so that the Pharaoh or his men won't kill me for your sake. Now he did this a second time with Avimelech. And he didn't teach Yitzchak correctly because Yitzchak asked Rivka to pretend to be his sister because he feared Avimelech. And he told him so when Avimelech called him on it the way the Pharaoh called Avram on it. He said, why'd you do this? And Yitzchak answered, because I thought there was no fear of God here. Well, where was his fear of God? Now, by the time we get to Yaakov, we see there's some kind of evolution in our peoplehood. The fear of God is in Yaakov. And it makes him a little bit different from our other forefathers. And we see an evolutionary trail which, if you take a look at the way the people of Israel are supposed to evolve, it goes like this. After Yaakov had the experience of wrestling with Peniel, with the face of God, with what is inside him even, Yaakov now limps because of the way the angel that he fought with grabbed his thigh. So Yaakov limps through history, but he's supposed to be evolving and be straight with God. This is the level of Yeshurun. Now he can only attain that with his new name, Yisrael, which means God rules. El is the Sar. So being straight with God, the Yosher issue, is part of our Tikkun and getting back to the authority, the real authority in the world. And this is something that all of us need to start examining immediately. If we burn with the truth, with the desire for truth and justice and goodness, which is the basis of God's authority, and only His, then we become Ariel. We ourselves become the altar of God's fire and truth and Torah. And where we're headed to build this olam haba, to build this Oel Hashem, which Japhet will want to take part in and join, we become Immanuel, where God can actually find a home among his people, which is his intent. Now, we have a command that is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and might. Said rapidly, it doesn't quite sink in. But when you think about it, it's the best psychological influence you can give yourself, because it means from the time you wake up, you know if you do that, you'll do everything right, you'll follow your conscience will be your directive, your matzpun will be your matzpen, and life will start to get sweet and you start earning blessings. So the important thing we have to take away from this first lesson is the imperative, the existential imperative of making the Tikkun of Adam and Eve. And with that, I wish you well and a happy real Shavuot. Please remember you can go to Israel Reclaiming the Birthright or Reclaiming Israel's Birthright on YouTube, and you'll have access to these videos and you can pass them on. And I want to thank God for making all this possible and leading me here today. It wasn't easy. Have a good day, everyone. Shalom.